Welcome to the fifth in our bespoke series for Seika on expert positioning and innovation. I'm Douglas Kruger. In the previous videos, we've spoken about how to restructure your business for distinction, how to use personality, cause, and communication techniques to stand out. Today, I'd like to show you how you can make your ideas vivid and memorable, whether you decide that writing is your medium, or whether you want to create videos or stand up and be brave and speak in public. These are the methods and the techniques used by the world's top communicators. If you watch some of the top economists and some of the top political commentators used in roadshows and on television, used extensively in the media, you will notice these techniques being used over and over again. I use them myself. My YouTube channel has almost 100,000 subscribers, and one of my videos has 2.5 million views. I have used these techniques in all of my books, and several of them are bestsellers. They are very simple and they work. Number 1, speak in moving pictures. Dr. Steven Pinker, who is a cognitive psychologist, has a book titled The Sense of Style. It's one of the best books you can read if you want to communicate more effectively. But here's the part that you need to hear. In the first 50 pages, he discusses how the brain processes information, and he points out that the human mind is perfectly capable of dealing with dots and dashes, charts and graphs, numbers, but the human mind doesn't love it. What lights us up is when we see moving imagery in the theater of the mind, and that is why writers are often told to show rather than tell. Really what that boils down to is, if people can see imagery moving in the theater of their imagination, it gets them involved in the process. Storytelling, therefore, is the heart and soul, the medium of communication. If you can take your idea out of the realms of abstraction and turn it into a picture that people can see, you will already be well ahead of most communicators. Steven Pinker has won awards for his insights into writing and for his own technical writing. And even as a scientist, he points out that most technical writers and most scientists tend to underestimate the value of imagination and emotion. And that is why storytelling is so incredibly powerful. He uses an analogy that's been around for a while in the world of public speaking and writing. He distinguishes between what he calls the elephant and the rider. The elephant, he says, is the emotional part of the brain. That's the part with all the messy human stuff, the biases, the emotions, the loves, the hates, the emotion. And the rider of the elephant. The rider is the logical part of the mind. Now, what he says is that you can eventually turn an elephant, but it takes a very long time. You can appeal to the logical, rational part of the brain, but it takes a long time to move the rest of the elephant, which is the emotion. That's why the best speakers are taught that in the first minute or two of your presentation, your goal is not so much to impart information, it's to get them to like you. It's to get them to think in terms of pictures and stories and movement and imagination. Once you have tapped into that, you can more easily turn the elephant, which is to say, you can more easily persuade the human mind. Number 2, use metaphors and similes. Once again, because the human mind is quite capable of dealing with abstraction, but doesn't love it, the most intelligent communicators turn that abstraction into a mini picture, a metaphor or a simile. It's as simple as saying something down the lines of, "It's like an anchor holding back the progress of the boat." Over the course of this weekend, I heard quite a clever one. A person was speaking about one category within another, and he used the analogy of it being like Russian dolls. Before you get to the second one, the first one has to be opened, and that was the way that it worked. And once you have that vivid image in your mind, you never forget the idea. We often tend to deride this sort of communication by saying it's like dumbing it down. Mensa would argue the opposite way. The High IQ Society, they reckon that the use of metaphors and similes is actually one of the most intelligent forms of communication. It is the ability to take reams of information, masses of data, and turn it intelligently into the thing we need to know. That takes skill. It's not a dumbing down. It is in fact a very intelligent way of communicating, and the human mind adores it. So the challenging question, are you writing, are you speaking in numbers and charts and graphs, or are you speaking in pictures that the mind can see and visualize? Number 3, let's go one step further. What if you made your audience the main character in a story? I'll give you an example of this one. My most regularly booked presentation is the one on expert positioning, and I have various different ways of getting into the content depending on the audience and the nature of the event. One of my favorites is to make the audience the main character. I will literally step onto a stage, and before greeting anyone, I will say, imagine yourself 3 years from today. You're leaving an event like this one, and you're en route to the radio station because they've asked you for an interview. On your way there, you get the call from your editor. Your editor asks how the book is going because your content, your ideas are hot right now. And I build up this entire scenario, a hypothetical story, in which the audience is the main character. Now that can be incentivizing. It is an incredibly powerful sales technique for your idea, for your concept, because instead of presenting it in abstraction, you are making the audience live through it as a hypothetical main character. What things do you want your audience to know? What things do you want your audiences to do? What behaviors do you want your clients to buy into? What do they need to know from you in order to position you as a thought leader and make your brand paramount? What if you took that information and made them the main character in a story? And that brings us to idea number 4, which is speak in picture postcards from the future. Now, the clever thing about this idea is you can use it in positive or negative sense. So the example of expert positioning was a positive example of a postcard from the future. Here's a picture of you 3 years from today. Imagine living through this life with the following embedded ideas. And that's how I get the ideas across. But it would be equally effective in the negative. Imagine yourself 3 years from today, stuck in the same cubicle. Your salary has remained the same, but your costs have gone up, and so on and so forth. And that would be a negative postcard from the future. Now, you can even use A versus B as a communication structure. You could start with a positive and then show the negative, or vice versa. What you're doing in both cases is you're getting your audience to engage with your ideas, to live through them, and you're persuading them of the merit of what you ultimately want them to do by getting them to live either the positive or the negative outcome. Could you make your clients, your audience, the main character in a story? And could you send them picture postcards from the future? Number 5, use the frustration and release model. There is a lot to be said, and Steven Pinker, as a cognitive psychologist, goes into a great deal of detail about how the mind enjoys tension and release. It's one of the reasons we read fiction so voraciously. We like the idea of watching a character get tied in knots, that's the tension, and then resolve those knots, that's the release. And there is something that the human mind loves about that structure, the tension and release. Now, that's why they do it in infomercials. And of course, in infomercials, they push it to the nth degree. It becomes cheesy. Is your home dirty and embarrassing? Are the neighbors scorning you and fleeing for their lives? Do you have cockroaches in your sink? Well, then you need new Kleenex. That's the extreme version, but you can dress it up in a suit and you can present it professionally. The basic core structure of tension and release is mentally attractive. So what if, instead of starting with your proposed solution, you built up the problem in story form? Build up the tension of the problem in story format, in your writing or in your speaking, in your presenting, and then give your solution. By doing so, you make your idea come alive. You give it that little bit of emotion that it might lack when presented in abstraction. And of course, you can embed your audience as the main character. These are very simple things that you can do, but they will elevate the level and the effectiveness of your writing and your speaking. I do it all the time now, and I do it pretty much without thinking. If I was given a topic to speak about, I'd stand up on the stage and say, imagine yourself in this scenario. And I would paint mental pictures and send postcards from the future, and it becomes second nature after a while. It's very easy. The first time you try it, it might feel a little strange. It may feel a bit more theatrical than what you're accustomed to. But give it a try. And of course, you can change the level of elevation of the language. You can go full-blown infomercial if you want to. But you can also give it elegant, professional level language. Turns out, again according to Mr. Steven Pinker, the best balance is the kind of writing that sounds like a one-on-one conversation, and it is addressed to the reader in the singular. So instead of saying, it should be considered that. You want it to sound as though you're talking to one person. You should consider. It's as though you are saying you to the reader, and you speak as though it is me and you should try this, and I've learned that, and this can work for you. According to cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker, that is the format of presentation that the brain most readily responds to. When you become distant, when you become formal, it creates more abstraction and takes people further away from engaging with your ideas. They can do it, but their heart might not be in it. You might appeal to the rider of the elephant, but you're not going to turn the entire beast. Appeal to the emotions and to the intellect. Speak in stories, and you will win both hearts and minds.